Hello, as you know, my name is Ian the Green. I am at the SCA, and we are going today looking at the rest of the process of how I go about making a ductus from a manuscript. There are lots of different ways, and this is the way that I found works best for me. There are other ways out there, so if you find them, please feel free to share them with the group or with anybody else for that matter. I uploaded to our Facebook group a bunch of different pages and things that we did not look at the previous session. So don't expect to see what we looked at the previous session today. This is basically what I'd done previously. So it shortcuts a lot of the work for me, but it's a lot of stuff that we can still play with. When I lived in Bloomington, Indiana, I was fortunate enough to live a 15-minute drive from the Lilly Library. The Lilly Library is a fantastic resource in that community, but it's also a fantastic resource in medieval literature, medieval manuscripts. They do have one of the world's largest mini book libraries available. But that's not what we're looking at today. We're going to look at today a page that was written by Alcuin of York, and it is his commentary on A Song of Solomon. It is the shelf mark for it is Pool 82 at the Lilly Library. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share screen so we can show. Yes, share screen, there it is. So we can take a look at the actual thing. There we go. Open that up. And this is the full page. On the left-hand side here is the Song of Solomon. On the right-hand side is the commentary. Need to move that out so I can actually use my, there we go. And if I zoom in, you can see the left-hand side is written in one script and the right-hand side is written in another script. Anybody want to tell me what the left-hand script is?
Anshul?
Left-hand side is Anshul. The L is a little bit different than the Anshul we learned. It's more like the capital L that you were used to today, but that's okay. There's always variations. And the right-hand side is, of course, it's Alcuin of York, so it has to be Carolingian minuscule. Okay, it doesn't quite have to, but it often is. So what we were doing last time, and I'm going to zoom in on this just a little bit more. And we can it was that we were taking letters in a program. In this case, it was Paint, cutting them out and sticking them on a piece of paper. Because we hadn't looked at this before, I wanted to go ahead and do a quick look at this in situ, well, not quite in situ, but where they're all together. So we kind of have a better look at what's going on. As you can see, there are some ligatures that are going on here, not too many. Usually it's S to T. Occasionally we're going to see a C and a T. Is that a ligature or do they just get stuck together? I think we're seeing ligatures personally. When we zoom in here, it doesn't look like we have an S, a T, an R, an A, and a T. Administrat. I think the pen just kept going. I don't know that, but it's kind of what it looks like to me. When we go down one, we have OR, probably S. I'm not good at Latin, so people can laugh at me and correct me if they want. DIL into the E. On this, I think the pen got picked up and they just happened to connect. But I think the C and T, maybe even over to the I, are ligatures. These are my guesses. I don't know. Carolingian is typically not full of ligatures. But you can see when you have these that are touching, how that can be problematic if you're going to be cutting it out and moving it over, because then if you look at it separately, you don't really know what it was supposed to be on the page. Now, if we look over here, this is Anshul, and these A's in Anshul are exactly the same as the A's over here. There's no difference. And that's because Carolingian is based off of, in part, the basics of what we find in Uncial. So, any questions so far? All right, with that, I will see if I can go ahead and should do a new share. Where are you? Right. Let's see if I can pull it up a different way. There it is. Now let's see if I can open up. There it is. Nope, that's not it. Huh. It's having a hard time. So I was going to open up A to F, I believe, but it's not wanting to do that. Oh, that's why. Okay. It's F to N. And that, of course I'm on that. Sorry, it's taking me so long.
No worries.
Well, I'm going to open up F to N. Unless like, oh, there's A to F. There we go. So everybody see A to F?
Yes.
All right. So we're seeing a lot of lettering going on here. And this was back when I was less knowledgeable than I am now. So I had arranged this totally differently than I did, but you know what? It's still what it is. When we take a look at the A's and they're completely out of context, what are we seeing with this A that looks that we might be able to copy or use or make useful? When we're doing this, we're looking for pen angle, and we're looking for X height, and we're looking for how the letter might connect. And if there's variations that are, I was sloppy versus, no, this is just a different form of the same letter. So who'd like to take a stab at pen angle here?
Looks close to 40 degrees to me.
Okay. I think we have a lot of variability, but 40 seems to be right-ish. Okay. Anybody want to take a stab at pen height or nib width, I should say? There we go, nib width. Now, as a reminder, we find nib width by finding the widest portion, the widest part of a stroke, measuring that in some way, either with a divider, which means that we don't actually measure it, we just have that width. And then we find the height of the letter and we find out how many of those, and then we take that, the measurement that we have from the widest part of the widest stroke, and we just plug it in there. How many of those go into that?
It looks to me between 3.5 to 4, but there's a lot of variety in these A's.
There is a lot of variety in these A's, I agree. So speaking of variety, do we have one form of A and sloppiness, or do we have more than one form of A?
I think we have what I would call the usual A, and then the A with a flourish.
Okay.
It's got a tail, and 3 of them have tails.
But if I can just ask a question here, when you're talking about what is the pen width, these are cut and pastes that have been magnified, correct?
Yes, these are cut and paste, magnified, and in this case, I can zoom in and out even further or less. So we're not going to get a true measurement of the width, but what I can get is a measurement of what's in front of me, and then turn it sideways and go up. So it's all a ratio anyway.
Okay.
It's not about the A's are exactly this width on the page. Nope, not at all what we're doing.
Other than the flourish, excuse me, the flourish on some of the letters, the general structure of the letter is the same. So I wouldn't suggest that we have more than one style of letter here.
Okay, we have some A's here that look like triangles. So let's see,
Mhm.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sixth one down in the first column, very much kind of a triangle. If we go up one row and all the way over to the right, very much kind of a triangle. Now, I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with you. I'm saying, so are we going to put that up as just being quick? His pen didn't quite write, trying to do the same form, or is this a second form? Because that triangle certainly is pretty different in looks to some of the other A's.
I don't know. I think you'd have to see where the letters around it sort of associate with it. You have to look at it in context.
Absolutely you do. And which is, in the end, why I agree with you that there really is only one form of the A. Let's see if I can do a new share here. There. So here we are back at the original document. And what side are we on? Okay, looks like, I think that's recto of it. You'll notice it's not even the full page. He kind of stops there, but this was chopped off and he was still writing on it anyway. If you look, we do have holes here from bookworms, or the larva of the beetle that we call a bookworm. But if we start looking for those triangular A's, which is what we're back here for, you can kind of see that this A here is somewhat triangular. But it also looks like his E here just came over in a ligature, and from that he made an A. We also have one of those fantastic tails.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
which is at the end of the word.
Yep, at the end of the word and at the end of a line.
So it may be a space filler.
Yep.
Just to balance the columns.
Well, you know, looks like, yeah, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
When we pull out and look at it. Because we also have it over here at an ET. This is an ampersand, by the way. As far as I can tell anyway. But back to that. So yeah, I think it's just quick writing, and therefore we can peg it to sloppiness on that one. This A here, Q-U-A-E, I think he had an ink problem. He had too much ink and blobbed it. Doesn't really look like he was going for a triangle.
No, because if you go on the line above, about 6, 7 letters over, there's another A. Yep. That one.
And we
And
can see the nice thin line here.
Yeah. And it almost looks like when he put his nib down, it just blotted.
Yeah.
And filled that space in. And you can see that in the subsequent 4 letters, is that there appears to be similar blobbing of the letters.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Before they clean up with the R.
Right. And so the reason why I have this discussion again is that it's very easy to get tunnel vision once you cut them out and put them on another thing to look at them individually. You still need to go back, just like, and I forget who said it, or I couldn't identify who said it. You have to look at it in context, because it's very easy to get that tunnel vision once you're on the other document. You need to look back and forth between your exemplar of what you're actually working on, and then, you know, make your decisions appropriately on the individuals. Now, remind me, since I didn't know who said it, who pointed that out?
Sheila.
Thank you. Because I want you to get credit. I always want people to get credit. All right. Also, for me, one of the fun things that I look at is this R. It is very much kind of a swoopy R, isn't it?
Mhm.
Every single letter. And I've had arguments and discussion with people like, oh no, the swoopy R did not show up until the 1200s. This is 800-ish. The swoopy R has been around a while. Maybe it died off, but it was around.
Well, yeah, it also depends on where it's hitting in the word because, sorry, we jumped around a bit.
We did.
At the end of the word, at the end of a word, it had a very different shape than in the middle of a word. Yeah,
The A.
hang on a second. See that line right there where it says Doctorus Reductus or Reduc right on that line? Whoop, lost you.
Right here?
Yeah, no, this line, next one down, follow it over to the right.
Oh, there it is.
And you see that R at the beginning of the next?
Well, is
There?
it an R or is it an S? Because we have a water stain here.
Yeah, see, I'm working on the assumption that that was a reduc or
Yeah, interesting.
because the question, oh yeah, okay, but sorry, I'm not quite as good when it comes to recognizing the letters, the differentiating between the S and the R.
No, that's
Because
fine.
you're right, that letter does turn up in the line above and the line above that. And I'm not sure those are S's.
So this is where knowing Latin would help.
Yeah.
And that's why I asked the question, because I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then this is the fun part about dealing with older documents. They're not perfect.
Mm.
And that imperfection does alter what's on the page. It's just the way it is. I'm not, but yeah, you're right. So let's see.
Yeah, I shouldn't make an assumption that that's the same letter.
Stop there, Ian.
Yes.
So in the top left-hand corner, second line, the A.
Yeah.
No, where you were, sorry. You were in the right spot, but at the time, he inserted an A. And
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to draw attention to that because I was involved in a discussion recently where it's quite appropriate to just simply, if you've left a letter off, to just poke it above and carry on.
It is. It's what
Yeah.
they did.
Mhm.
This isn't gloss.
It's not
Yeah.
supposed to be perfect either.
Well, you wouldn't want to have to go back and rewrite the entire page because you forgot an S at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not with the amount of time that you spend in it. Anyway, so we have come to the conclusion that the A's, like even this one, are pretty much all the same form, but they're not all properly formed. Does that make sense?
Agreed.
So
Now, is that a function in the purpose of this column? You said that I believe that the left column is the Songs of Solomon, and this is the commentary.
yeah. So over here we have the Song of Solomon, and you notice that the lettering over here is very precise.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get over here, and it's just not precise anymore.
But is that like a student writing comments in the column?
No, that's Alcuin of York writing commentary. So what's going on in part is that at this point in time where Alcuin was around, the Bible had to be written in uncial because it was the only script that was pretty enough, holy enough, whatever you want to call it. It had to be written in uncial, and it better be written very nicely. There are, of course, places where that's not what it was done, but in this time and place, that's what it was. On the right-hand side is, and I don't know, we know who wrote the left, but we do know that on the right hand, we have Alcuin of York's personal writing. This is his hand of the script. And he is writing commentary. The question I wonder, and I'd have, you know, the guy, I can't remember his name, and it's like really, really famous. He gets to carry the big book when there's somebody being coronated or married. Now I can't think and talk at the same time, apparently. In England, with the behind the Queen carrying the book. All of a sudden I can't remember his name. I feel bad. Let me see if I can find it real quick. No, I didn't keep that. Of course I didn't. Anyway, he was at the time visiting the Indiana University, and made the and said, no, this is definitely Alcuin of York's hand. I can't remember his name. It's driving me nuts. I can see his face. Oh, well, I'll move on. And so I don't know if he was in a rush to make the commentary. Quite honestly, it seems to me like it would be something like he was dictating to somebody who was writing quickly to go with that dictation. But that is not the determination that was made. This is his hand. All right. So before we got started, Taliesin and I were talking about the letter B. If you look at it in context, the letter B looks like, and pretty much every ascender here looks like it's not straight up and down, but maybe at about a 10% slant. The question I have is it? Or is the page slanted in the picture? And if we're looking at the lines here, the lines are certainly not perfectly horizontal.
No, but I think you need to take a look at the vertical in relationship to the horizontal as to whether or not it's perpendicular to it.
Right. So here is our perpendicular line.
Well, no, I meant if you're taking a look at the individual letters in relationship to the horizontal line that the word is sitting on. You see the relationship of the L to the horizontal line under it.
Yep.
And when you do the same thing with the B's.
And the D's.
Yeah, there is a very slight slant to the letter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I agree. There is
And it's consistent, because if you look where you just were a second ago, where there was a D and an L,
Mm-hmm.
the ascenders are parallel if you ignore the I in between. The white space between the D and the L, they are parallel.
I agree.
Right.
And the
But they're
I,
not exactly perpendicular to the horizontal line.
Yeah.
No, they're not. They have a very slight slant to them.
Yep.
And interestingly, that's not present in the I. Because if you look at the I between the D and the L, and then you go over past the T, they seem more upright. And then there's another one at the end of that word, and they don't have that same slant to them, which is interesting.
And you see that with the U.
Yeah.
Over here at the far right on the U, is kind
Well,
of.
and if you look at the left stroke, not the first stroke, the left stroke, it does have a slight slant to it, but it straightens up on the second upright.
Yep. And it's the letter U. You're used to seeing on the left stroke a little bit of a curve on most U's.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily all.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So here's, and I was about to switch over to B's, but here's one of those A's with the big long tail on it. I really think that's just going quickly. I don't think he's trying to be pretty there. It's just going quickly, and that's what happened. But anyway, so if we switch over to looking at just the B's, so share. Where did you go? I love how it moves things around on you depending on what you clicked on. There we go. All of these B's. And you can kind of, when I zoom in on it, you can kind of see the line that's underneath them. And like this line here is horizontal, but that B is not. And at first, when I was looking at this, I thought it was a function of it being a club serif, but I don't think so. I quit thinking that a long time ago. I really do think that it is about a 5 to 10% slant on it. So the fun thing about this letter B is that we can kind of see, due to its imperfections, what stroke probably was done first and what stroke was probably done second. If we look at the fourth B here, we probably have the upright stroke being the first one. We probably goes either straight into or becomes a part of, and I would say go straight into the bottom curve here. The pen probably gets picked up, and then the belly of the B is probably the last stroke of the letter, and then in comes the club serif. Now the club serif could, be a part of it, but when we look at all these other ones, it just like, if we go down a line and we look at the middle, the second one and the third one, they don't have a club serif. They're just drawn straight. So I think the club serif was the last stroke. What do other people think? How do we think Alcuin was probably constructing this letter B?
So based on what you're saying, Ian, you're not suggesting that first he did the club, then without lifting his pen, went to the top of the ascending stroke or the spine of the B to pull it down and then curve it to the 5 o'clock position.
What I think he did was start with his ascender and pull down and go through and stroke all the way through the bowl of the B. I don't think he picked up his pen.
No, because it tends to look as a continuous line. So I would agree.
And then, the second stroke could be the club. The second stroke could be the finishing off the bowl of the B, but because we find letters that are not fitting, that don't have that club, I think the club is the last stroke. But it really, you could do it either way. And that's the thing, is that just because we think this is how the scribe who wrote it did it, doesn't mean that's how we would do it. So what do people think would be the most efficient way to write this? What do people think would be the way they would want to write it? Because sometimes the most efficient way is not how we want to write it. Usually is, but not always. So we've agreed on somewhere around a 40-degree pen angle. How would we want to draw the first stroke? Eleanor, do you want to try and take a stab at how you might want to try and draw the first stroke?
No, I would do it as you described it, but I would omit the club serif. I would start with my pen at a 40-degree angle, attempt to pull straight down, inevitably fail, curl up a little bit and then lift the pen to do the filling in of the top part of the round part of the B.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I would have to agree with her. I would do the ascender stroke, put the club in, and then put the bowl of the B in. So that would be 3 separate strokes.
Yeah. And if you don't do the club serif at all, you can do this in 2 strokes.
Yeah, I tend to do the club serif as the last part of the stroke. Do the ascender, then the bowl, then the club serif. And
Yeah,
that's,
my-
I would,
Go ahead.
no, I'm sorry. That's probably, if I was in a rush, how I would end up leaving off the club serif.
And see, my anal mind is challenged to do that. I want to always start at the left, finish the process as I move across.
Mm.
There's nothing, nobody has said anything that is a wrong way to do it. Because in the end, if you're first of all, you're making your own ductus, so you can do it any way you want. And second of all, if the goal is to try and make it look mostly like what we're seeing on the page, and again, you can modify it a little, do it the way you want to. It's your choice. And as long as, and I've said this from every class from the beginning, is I don't care how you draw the letter, as long as it ends up looking like it's supposed to. Well, this is the essence of that. This is the spirit of that. You're making your own ductus. Draw it the way you want to. All right, the letter C. Just looking at this letter, how many strokes do you think this letter C probably has?
2.
I can't see it being more than 2. Can anybody see this being a 1 stroke?
I don't, due to the little tilde on the top.
Right.
Well, the only way it would work as a single stroke really would be as if you started it at the bottom, started it at the lower curve, worked your way up and then across.
Yep. And there are some left-handed people that tell me that that's the easiest way for them to do it.
Yeah, I'm a lefty. Sheila is a lefty, so I would have a tendency to start at the bottom right-hand corner and then curve up and across.
Yep. So you could do this in 1 stroke. Me as a right-hander, no. This is a 2-stroke letter.
Yeah.
So, and again, there's no wrong way. Does it look like the way you want it to look when you get done?
I find it amazing that, as we observed in the R earlier, and we see it here in the C, the amount of undulation that he gets in his caps.
Yeah, is a lot.
And I can hear myself teaching letter forms and saying, be very careful not to undulate. It doesn't exist in this hand, and yet I see here that there's all kinds of them.
Yep. And this I learned Carolingian minuscule specifically to write my then girlfriend, now wife, a love letter.
I'm sure she appreciated the effort.
It worked. I tell you what, that is what my instructors kept telling me. No, don't undulate. Keep it smooth. Keep it even. And then, like I handle Alcuin of York, and he's like, it's 800 AD. I'm in, 1990 something at the time. No, I'm in 2006. No, let's see where I'm at. 2006 is when I started doing calligraphy-ish. So yeah, this is more like 2009, 2010, and laughing at me because it's 1200 years later.
There's a lot of variation in that letter.
There is. And that's one of the things that I also like to point out is when you are doing a ductus from a manuscript, do not expect consistency.
Yeah.
But I think though, Ian, when you get this many variations and you compare them back to the original script that you've drawn them from,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to necessarily replicate all the variations. You can
Oh.
identify ones which, as we've done with the R, where the R tends to undulate at the end of a word or the end of a line. Similarly, probably for the C. You can pick one or two variations and stick to those and still be respectful of the manuscript. Like, you don't have to learn all of them.
Yep, I agree.
Did you
So-
say you started calligraphy in 2006?
Yeah, 2005, 2006.
Now you're making me feel really old. I started
sorry.
in about 68, 69. That was
So-
a joke.
In case people want to know kind of like how in detail you can get, can you see this
Yeah.
chart from
Mhm.
spreadsheet? So this is the letter A, and I picked 7 of them. And the first one had, I don't even know what my measurements here are, if they're millimeters, centimeters, what, I honestly don't. But I have an average of 7.42, an adjusted average of 7.4 for letter height. And I have everything from 6.6 at the lowest and a height of 9 at the highest. That's a lot of difference. And letter width is a whole lot more even, with the lowest being 9 and the highest being 11. We end up having an average of around 10. Now, you know, and then we start
10
looking at
10,
angles.
10 what? Are we talking about pen widths?
I don't know what the units are, but these are measurement units, and I don't know if they were supposed to be, what kind of measurement unit it was supposed to be. Now, when we start looking at angles, the stem angle, so that would be the back, you know, the backbone of the A. I have some that are at 92. The highest angle is 98. And the lowest angle is 61, which gives me an average angle of right around 87-ish with an adjusted. And so what I'm doing with the adjusted is I'm taking out the lowest, taking out the highest, and then just averaging out everything else. So my average is 85, my adjusted average is at 87. That way I'm getting rid of my outliers. But if I look at the bottom belly angle, look at how much the pen is moved in angle. On number 1, I have a top of the belly angle at about 148, and the bottom of my belly angle is at about 162. And so what that is that it's that you've come down and you're going up the other way. Does that make any sense to anybody? Or is this just not working?
Don't understand it.
No, I get it.
Oh, okay.
You want to explain it in a different way? Because I'm struggling to come up with a different way.
Well, there's 2 angles on the curved belly of an A. The top curve being the first stroke, and the bottom curve, the bottom angle being the return,
That is correct.
the stem. So there's quite a significant difference between the stroke going down into the belly and the stroke coming back up into the belly, or back up into the stem.
Right. That's exactly the right way to say that. Thank you for the clarification. So his pen isn't staying at the same angle. We have a difference quite often of 20 degrees. Not always, like we have some real close similarity on number 4 here. Probably would be better if I actually started coloring these to make it, you know, visible which one I'm talking about, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or, you know, whatever. And I got into a whole bunch of other detail that we don't need to go into, but you can really break down a letter into some pretty significant detail if you want to.
And the interesting thing about this is, as you say, how much variation there is from letter to letter
Right.
when you convert it into numbers and angles.
Yeah. So back to this over here. So the C is a pretty simple letter. But if we start looking at D, typically I tell people draw a C and then put a stem on it. And then if it doesn't quite match up, fill in the lines. Does that work with this D, or should we do, how would we draw this D?
Can you shift it over a little bit closer towards the positioning of the C? A little more central on your screen?
I'm sorry?
Can you shift it a little bit more towards the center of your screen? It's a little off the right side for me.
It is, and the most I can do for that is to zoom in more, and
okay.
That's the best I can do.
Okay.
Because I'm actually not looking at this in Paint. I'm looking at it in a picture reviewer. I can certainly open it in Paint.
No.
No, that's okay. I just changed my settings so that the video block on the side is not blocking my view.
Yeah, I had to move my thing over so that you could see it, so it would be able to be seen. So here we have with this letter D, how would we want to draw it?
And there certainly seems to be examples of what you're saying. If you look at the second row, second one in, and if you move down the one below that, and the one below that, it looks even on that last one. If you go to any one on that row, it almost looks like he's done a C first, and then done the ascender line, because you have that sort of undulation of the cap on the C.
Yep. But we also have a lot of just straight over. Now, to me, that straight over is he drew a C, didn't quite connect, filled it in with another stroke. And if we look at the top line, last letter, it's not the best. And I don't know if that's, screen issue, or if that's, an older letter and text issue on the page. But it looks to me like we have a thicker line up here from a second stroke. A lot of these things we have to guess at without.
Yeah, it also looks like he had ink issues on that one too.
Yep, I would agree.
Yeah, because you can see it in the stem as well. And also remember that these were done in the 8th century, I believe is the date of this one. So they were done with quills.
Yeah, this is roughly 800 AD.
Yeah, so they were done with quills. So the other factor that may be contributing to some of this is the fact that he may need to recut his quill.
Yeah. And this is a recto universal of one page out of a book. And I don't know how the page got separated from the book, but we know that it did. All right, so let's take a look at E. The E's to me are kind of fun. I did a lot of them, as you can see.
Well, what is it? The most common letter in the alphabet?
Pretty close. Now, in English, I don't know what it is in Latin, but I was fascinated by the variance that we saw in the letter E, and yet how some of it is still very much exactly the same. Now, one of the neat things is that when you make a mistake with a letter, it kind of shows you what was supposed to happen. And so when I look at this E, I see this stroke here, I see a miss and a bring down. So that tells me the way he was doing it was 2 strokes. But again, I mean, just like C, if you're a lefty, this is potentially a 1-stroke letter for you. What do other people think? Also, the other thing is that the cross stroke with the E, in theory, if it is thin, is being done with the broad, with the edge of the nib being flat and being pulled. So it tells us a pen angle.
Mhm.
Now, we already know that he didn't keep his pen angle the same. He was twisting his hand, whether or not he should have been, but he was.
Well, and I mean, if you look at that last stroke, cross stroke, one about 6 down, again, it looks like he has ink issues because of the blobbing. That one, yeah.
Yeah, it's a major blob.
But the one above it, if you look at it, he starts nice and thin, but he's changed his pen angle as he's gone across.
And it gets thicker.
Yeah,
And you can see that.
yeah.
So
But
this
then
is
if
the
you go to,
original pen angle.
yeah,
And then as he's going up, he goes, yeah, and then starts to pull it over. Now that
Yeah.
might be because he's connecting. We need to go back and look at the original. I
true.
mean, that could be a T that's right there. We don't know.
Well, and but having said that, if you go to the next column, 2 columns over, you can see where he's made a connection, but he's maintained the thinness of it.
Yep.
As he does in the one before.
And here we have a double E. Anyway,
Yeah.
Yeah, but if we take a look at the first column, second from the bottom, that one there, it looks like it connects up to that, and the one beside it looks like it connects up to something that is more of a curved letter, possibly not a T. You'd have to take a look at it in the context of what the attaching letter is, I think.
right.
Yeah.
And I didn't, and at the time when I made this, I was not careful to map where they came from. So, I mean, we can go back and try and
Right.
figure it out, but that's not the point. The point is that's
No.
what we should have done, or I should have done. Also, when we look at this E that you mentioned, second from the
Mhm.
bottom,
Yep.
yeah, we've got issues here. And I attribute that to pen.
Yep.
Not
Yep.
ink, but pen.
Okay.
Doesn't make me right necessarily, but that looks like he was skittering his pen in some way for some reason. Either it was catching or he was putting pressure on it funny. That's what it looks like to me. It doesn't look like ink blotting. To me, I see this cross on the E to be a whole lot of different angles, from 30 to 45. Even this one here, we're looking at
Mhm.
60-ish.
Because he
So-
clearly did not worry about where the cap on the E finished. And he simply went back to the stem of the first stroke and took his crossbar across, and because he doesn't even always connect
Nope.
two
And that's the
pieces.
thing is that,
Yeah.
to me, this is, he's crossing his E, not pulling down, coming back, and then going forward.
Mhm.
He is stroke one, or the left-hand stroke was his first stroke. He finished the top of the C with the second stroke, lifted his pen, and crossed the E.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But
And
some of these,
in most cases, he appears to have captured the cap on the E, but he clearly also doesn't. It doesn't matter if they miss.
yeah. And while there are things in this that make it look like it matters, or it looks like they were in one stroke, done in one stroke, if you're used to working with iron gall ink, you see that kind of thing happen anytime you connect strokes. It makes it look like they're a flowing stroke instead of two separate strokes.
Mhm.
And it happens all the time with iron gall ink. And if you're used to working with iron gall ink with a quill, you see it more. And that's one of the reasons why I tell people, based on what you know, you're not wrong, but there's this other stuff that if you're used to using it, you see this all the time. And so it's one of the things about using period materials or period-esque materials that really kind of changes your perspective on what was probably done at the time. Now, again, I say probably because we weren't there. I wasn't there. I don't know. But based on what I've done, this is what I think now, because I've worked with these tools this way.
Mhm.
All right. So are we getting a good idea of how the process of going through the letters, looking at a manuscript, pulling the letters away, make sure you keep your manuscript original handy, and
Mhm.
then try to learn how to draw these by yourself? Because this is the process of making a ductus from a manuscript. It's having this conversation with another person, with yourself, and figuring out angles and working it out. Does this sound like something that now that we've been through this process that people might be able to do for themselves?
It raises to my mind that I'm not sure I want to invest that kind of time in a single scroll.
Yep.
I mean, in all honesty, I appreciate knowing and understanding the process of creating a ductus to match a manuscript so that I can replicate it as closely as possible in doing a scroll. But it goes to the question that people truly have no idea of the time that goes into preparing to do a scroll before you finally put it all together. Like, this is not an easy task that you're going to do in 15 or 20 minutes.
Right. And you can make a ductus for a manuscript for for a lot of different purposes, but the two major ones are you want to recreate it as faithfully as possible. The other one is you're using it for inspiration because you like how it looks, but you're going to make it your own. And if you are trying to recreate a ductus and make it as faithful to the manuscript as possible, that takes a lot of work. That takes what I did with the letter A and making all the stuff and average, trying to get it all worked out. If you just are going to use it as inspiration, you don't need to do any of that. You can cut it out, look at the ones and go, oh, okay, I think I'll do it like this based on what I'm seeing in front of me and move on. It doesn't need to be particularly complicated. But if you want to make it as faithful to the manuscript as possible, it's complicated, isn't it?
The other thing is every time you do a scroll, you don't have to use a new hand, which
That's right.
seems to be the prevailing truth inside of the SCA is, God forbid you make a series of scrolls that look similar or have the same hand, right?
Well, Your Excellency Eleanor, how many scrolls have I done for you, and how many have been how many of those have been done in the same script?
4
Yeah.
and 2. So 2 groups of 2, I believe.
Yeah. I have no problem doing the script in the same script over and over again, depending on who I understand to be receiving it and how much time I have to put into it. I am not going to write in Unshul if I have the time to do something more complicated. Unshul is quick and easy for me. If you're going to ask me to do it in Gothic Tessitura Quadrata, I'm going to take forever to get that done because I'm slow on that script.
And I guess in Ansteora, we don't have issues with having similar looking works coming out of the same artist.
Yep. And we didn't have that problem in the Middle Kingdom either, or in North Shield.
Yeah.
Whereas on Tyrian and particularly Thierry, I would say that 90% of our charters and many of our scrolls are done in Norse ruins. And it gets so goddamn boring. I did a particular reign, and of course, I mean, all of the charter designs were done in Norse ruins. And by the time I didn't have to look at the exemplar to translate from English to runes. It was just like, oh, that's, and I would just do the letter form. It became so automatic. I thought, okay, no more Norse runes for me for 6 months.
I'm going to stop recording.